Hello everybody and welcome to That's Football. Have Arsenal bottled this title race that will go to Manchester City? I think not, and I think it's just ridiculous actually that this is the rhetoric that's being put out there. If I'm leading a race in a mini metro and I'm being chased down by a Formula One car, I'm going to lose. And I think that is basically what's happened with Arsenal. So you can get Piers Morgan and Gary Neville coming out calling Arsenal bottlers. And I think opinions are there to be, challenged and agreed with. I get that. But I just do not grasp or understand this Arsenal have bottled it argument when it's massively disrespectful to what Arsenal have achieved. But it's even more disrespectful to the brilliance of Manchester City. So we're going to break this down and we're going to look at it because I look at some. I mean, look, Piers Morgan doesn't know much about football. He just goes, he flip flops like a weather vane. He's ridiculous. I think he thinks Aubameyang should be managing the team as player manager or something like that. But I was looking at what Gary Neville said, and he said there seems to be a narrative now that it's City's strength, injuries, and a tough run-in that's the cause of Arsenal's collapse. And then he goes on to talk about pressure and all sorts of stuff. When actually, Gary, it's absolutely obvious that it's the strength of City and Arsenal's injuries that have caused this title collapse, if you want to call it that. But I wouldn't call it a bottle job, and I'm going to tell you why. Quite simply, what Arsenal have achieved from 5th place last season is remarkable. And I know people will say, but Mark, in the from the last 21 points, they've took 9. And yeah, look, that's not great. It isn't great. But why have Arsenal suddenly fell off? Look, for me, there's easy ways to break this down. A Premier League season about 38 games. It's not about 9 games. It's about 38 games. And if you want to talk about Arsenal, dropping points in their last few games, well, I think that will perfectly coincide with Saliba injury. So you could easily write it off as that. People can say it's pressure, this, that, and the other. I think we're playing in a ridiculously competitive league where it's unsustainable unless you're somebody like Man City to keep that form up over 38 games. And as I say, you can look at Arsenal over the last few games, and it's so obvious that they've missed Saliba and certain players, have had a drop in form because they don't really have a lot of rotation. But if I said to you, well, all right, Arsenal have taken 9 from their last 21, but in their first 16 games of the season, they took 43 from 48. That's unbelievable. 43 points from 48. They only lost 1 and drew 1 in their first 16 Premier League games to the World Cup. So where do you draw the line on brilliance and bottling? A season is measured across 38 games. There will be runs of bad performance and there will be unbelievable runs of performance. So look, 43 points out of 48 is incredible. And that's the pace that Arsenal set in the first 16 games. Unbelievable points tally. No one's talking about that anymore. Between February and March, they won 8 Premier League games in a row. Arsenal finished 5th last year. Where's that come from? How do you take 43 points from 48? How do you go on an 8-game winning streak in this most competitive Premier League? It's unbelievable what Arsenal have achieved. And I'm sorry, Gary, and I'm sorry, Piers, and I'm sorry anyone else who's calling them bottlers because it makes them feel good. And it'd be very easy to do that for all of us. Everybody loves calling Arsenal bottlers, but I think it's disrespectful to them and what they've achieved this season because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's not a surprise to me that a team that's won 11 games in a row, Manchester City, is just a quicker car in the race. And Pep Guardiola, I think it's disrespectful. I think it's so disrespectful to Manchester City and Pep Guardiola to say that Arsenal have bottled a title race when Man City have just ran the race to win the race at the end. They haven't gone blitzing out from the start. They've timed it to perfection. They're going to hit, look, they might not hit 94 points because they would basically already won it, so they might rotate players now. But if they needed to, they would win their next 3 games. They would beat Brentford away, they would beat Chelsea at home, and they would beat Brighton away because they're better than everybody else. So 94 points is what Man City easily could still achieve and may still achieve. That means that Arsenal, to win this league, would need 95 points. There's only 4 teams in Premier League history that have won the title with 94 points. More than 94 points. 95 points. Chelsea did it with 95. I think Man City, Liverpool and Man City Centurions are the other 3. So how can you bottle something? And let's not forget, if Man City get 94 points, they won it last year with 93, where Liverpool pushed them all the way to 92. So Man City have the potential to be better than last season against an experienced Liverpool side that they held off. And you're thinking Arsenal from 5th, nowhere, a club that's been nowhere near a title for years, comes into this title race, loses out to a Man City team that should get more points than they got last year, and they're called bottlers. Because ultimately, they don't have the squad that Man City's got. They've picked up some injuries, and they're just running out of steam. I don't think they're running out of mentality. I don't think they're failing under pressure. I haven't seen that from Arsenal. I've seen a very tired team. I'm surprised people haven't spoken about that. I've seen a very drained Arsenal side that's taken a few blows, but I haven't seen a side that's wilted under pressure. I just think ultimately there's a skill gap, and Manchester City are on a completely different level. And I think it's incredibly disrespectful to Arsenal, and it's remarkably disrespectful to Manchester City to be sat here going, well, it's not me, but for people to be sat there going, I've been in a title race, I know what it's all about, Arsenal have bottled it. And I'm like, well, there's so much evidence that they haven't. I think their start to the season was incredible. I think at times the amount of games they've won has been incredible. And I think Arsenal now are, I think they've I just think if Saliba had stayed fit, they would be in a much better position. I'm not saying they would have won the league, but I think they'd be in a much better position. And I think if Arsenal had what City have got, where, you know, you can take Saka off and bring Mahrez on, you can take Martinelli off and bring Grealish on, you know, you can rest De Bruyne and play Bernardo Silva. That's why Man City are going to win this league. But it must not be forgotten that Manchester City's points tally, what Arsenal was set to win this league, they'd have to be in the top 5 Premier League points tallies ever to have won this title. So how can you bottle something when they were 5th last year with that squad? Does that, I suppose the best way of putting it is, does that Arsenal team look like a team that would get 95 points at the start of the season? Does that Arsenal squad look like a squad that can go 38 games and get 95 points? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That Arsenal team, at the start of the season, most people didn't put it in the top 4. And now suddenly, because they've ran out of steam at the end of the season because of injuries and they don't have the squad, they're now being called bottlers because they were top at Christmas. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think Man City, like Manchester United used to do as well, have shown the old adage that the Premier League is won over 38 games. It's not where you are at Christmas, it's where you are at the end of May. And Manchester City have just shown they've got the best manager, they've got the best first 11, and they've got a bench that would start for most of the top 6. Not most of the Premier League, most of the top 6. Mahrez is a bench player for Manchester City, effectively. Well, and I mean that in the nicest possible sense, because I think he's brilliant. But when Pep picks his best team, I think Mahrez and Foden are on the bench. And so is Alvarez. And I think all 3 of those players are pushing to start for most of the top 6. They're that good. And if they're not pushing to start for most of the top 6, there'd be bloody good players for them. And that's what Man City have got on their bench. They're an incredible side, I hate to say it. And if bottling it is finishing less second to Manchester City, who get 94 points, I personally just think that rhetoric is completely about... I think it's self-serving. I think it's about making noise. Oh, look at me calling them bottlers. Or it's a complete and utter lack of grasping just how good Man City are and how big the improvement for Arsenal has been. Of course there's disappointment, and of course Arsenal fans can look at it and go, we've taken 9 points from the last 21. But does that not answer a question as well? You took 9 points from your last 21, but you took 43 from your first 48. You went on an 8-game winning run between February and March. Like, it's a 38-game season. You don't look at the last 29 from 21. You don't look at the first 43 from 48. You merge it all together in a 38-game season. That's what Pep does. He's not looking at what he's doing in October. He's looking at where he's going to be at the end of May. And when you amalgamate it all together, Arsenal's season's been ridiculous. Ridiculous. But ultimately, there's only... Put it this way. There's only 4 teams in Premier League history that would beat that Man City side to a title. So in 30 years of the Premier League, there's only 4 teams that would beat this Man City team to the title with north of 94 points. Guess what? 2 of them are Man City. So there's only Chelsea with 95 points and Liverpool with and I think actually Liverpool would have won it again because they came second with 97 points as well. But 3 teams then in Premier League history would have beat Man City this season. But Arsenal are bottles. Arsenal have bottled it. 5th last year, amazing season, but they bottled it, even though only 3 teams in Premier League history have got more points than what Man City should get, which is 94. I think it's sensationalist, and I think we're better than that as football fans. I think we're much better than that. I get the bravado, I get the banter, but when that's all over and you assess Arsenal's season, there's no way they bottled it, in my opinion. Thanks for watching. Get your comments in below.